Welcome to Reach Minds, thoughts for your life's journey. Today, we will be exploring insights on creating space, navigating healing and transition towards wholeness and understanding liminal spaces. We'll also be discussing the crucial need for individuals and organizations to reconnect by integrating body, mind, and spirit. My guest today's motto is that healing is a return to wholeness and creates a space for living and working in alignment with our true selves and with purpose. I'm so grateful to Jae Sloan, who has agreed to share their wisdom with us today. Jae is an organizational consultant, business and holistic coach, writer, speaker, and artist, and that's just a few things he does. Jae's diverse background and personal journey, which I recently learned through their LinkedIn activity, made me so eager to explore that I contacted him and said, I must have you on my podcast. Because I think what they need to say is really interesting and inspiring to myself and to others. Jae lives in Southwest Wales with their husband, Greg, and dog, Fred. Jae's pronouns are they and them. Welcome, Jae.
Thanks so much for having me. It's good to see you.
So, Jae, let's get going. I really want to spend our time together exploring some of the yummy things that you wrote on the LinkedIn. One of my first questions from a place of curiosity is, how has the work that you're doing shaped you in recent years?
I love that question, partly because I've had this unique opportunity to really shift, not necessarily my focus, but I think my work in some ways. So obviously when I worked in the corporate sector, let's say, I did that for 20 years and education before that. But I think it felt a little bit boxed in. And the reason why I say that is because I think I was always interested in more. That's not to say that I didn't love the work that I did. And so my consulting work and my coaching was really born out of that experience, I would say. Having left the corporate world, it created opportunity, I would say, to explore a bit and in different ways. Some of it has been practical. So I think I describe myself as an artist. That's the most recent addition, I would say, to my professional book, I would say. And it really was a result of the last few years having the opportunity to explore different things that I was interested in and thinking about that. And also from a more, I would say, philosophical point of view, like, where is it? What is the kind of work that I want to do? And I think even more importantly, who are the people I want to work with? Both individuals, leaders, but also organizations as well. And really creating the space for me to think about that more holistically, because I was thinking about this and I was like, when you get paid within a company, you just do the work that comes to you. There isn't necessarily a lot of choice. Now working independently, I do get to make choices about who I work with or who I speak with and try and connect with and build relationships with. So I think that's an esoteric way to put it. But I think basically the way I describe it very practically is now I get to do all the stuff I love.
So at what point, as I said at the beginning of the podcast, we'll be navigating healing and transition towards wholesome and understanding that liminal space. At what point in your journey did you decide, this is what I want to do, really?
Yeah, I think there wasn't any one particular point. I think there was an evolution in some respects. And I think, however, I do remember very specifically a point in time where I made a specific decision that really changed the course of my life, I would say. And I went to university and I had these idealistic points of view around what would happen. You study hard, you do really well, and then you get this great job and you live this wonderful life. And it didn't really work out that way. And part of it is what was going on economically at the time, but also other things involved. Anyway, I became a bit disillusioned and thought, gosh, I don't want to buy into that system that says if you do these things, this is what will happen. Because I was interacting and networking with people, I was like, oh, I don't want their life. And so I really started to think about what it is I wanted to do, and took a year out basically. And when we talk about transitions, sometimes in liminal spaces, it's sitting in that space and not trying to rush it too much. And I'm quite methodical, I would say. And so I started to think and narrowed it down to 4 different things that I really wanted to do. Really grounded in this concept of I wanted to have fun in my life, but also work, which sounds novel back in that was the early 90s, I would say, when people weren't really talking about it so much. But I think that's what kicked it off for me. And I made this choice. I wanted to do something fun. And that's why I studied what I studied. And then it set me on this path. And it's something I've always held on to. So when I start to get, let's say, unhappy, and that's a very generic term, there's lots to that. But it's a signal to say, let's have a look and what needs to change.
So is that when you go into your liminal space?
Yeah, I think sometimes intentional, sometimes it's forced. I'm not going to lie, because like, for example, to the move to the UK that I did in 2005 was very intentional. And there was this space in between where I was like, and part of it lasted for years, where I was like, I was getting used to the culture and a new home in lots of different ways. A choice that wasn't made for me is when I left the corporate world, in some respects, my role was made redundant, and I chose not to look for another job inside that company. And that was purposeful, but that decision wasn't made. And that's often what happens to us. Like, other people make decisions that have impact, but that cause us into that space of transition, and also an opportunity, I would say, to say, here's space. What am I going to do with that? And
Absolutely. What am I going to rush in and grab something that's familiar, or am I going to stay with the discomfort, that kind of liminal space? Maybe we can define what liminal space is for those who may not know. We know what we're talking about. How would you define liminal space?
Yeah, liminal space for me is, in simple terms, the space between. And it could be that you've made a decision, or it's been made for you, or you're like, I don't like what I'm doing now. I want to do something different, or this relationship as it stands isn't working. I need to do something different, and not yet knowing what the next step might be from a work perspective, a life perspective, a personal growth perspective. I think that's the really interesting thing about it. It's the space in between where we're like, there's someplace else that I want to get to. I'm not sure exactly what it is, maybe, or how to get there. But so sitting in the space in between, the liminal space.
Yeah, actually, because when I think about liminal space, I think about a caterpillar that is actually in the gestation period. Yeah. And it's that period of stretching, deciding, and then eventually emerging into a butterfly. So I often think about liminal space in that context as well. But it's all part of the transition. Now, one of the things you touched on earlier on is that you've made several changes, and you say big changes and transformation is possible at any age. Aren't most people fearful of change, do you think?
I think I really thought about this, and I challenged myself, because I think this is often what we hear and what we're told, that people are afraid of change, particularly when we're talking about big change, let's say in the corporate space where I used to work. People are like, oh, they're afraid of change, or we have to convince them, that sort of thing. When I really think about it, I think more strongly we're attached to comfort. So it's sometimes less about fear. It's more, I like where I am. I feel comfortable here. So the motivation, or I guess the understanding of what needs to change and why isn't necessarily there, or just simply, I don't want to change because I like where I am right now. And then there is some fear attached to that too. I don't know what it's going to be like necessarily, or in particular when at work, let's say, when decisions are made for us, I think that's sometimes fear-based. I don't know what that's going to be like, or I'm working with an organization now that has a big leadership change, and there is some anxiety around that. What's going to happen? What does this mean? Lots of different things. Yeah. But I also want to honor, there's plenty of people that I've worked with too that are like, great. I actually really like change. I see it as an opportunity and stuff. And so there's space for all kinds of, I would say, responses. But I think the thing that matters most to me that I see and sometimes that I feel is this idea of being comfortable and not wanting to move away from that.
Yeah. And I guess where that takes me, Jay, is that sometimes our comfort is based also on discomfort. And because it's familiar to us, we stay with it as opposed to maybe taking a leap of faith and saying, okay, can I just try? And people maybe don't want to, it's the known rather than the unknown that
Yeah,
people shy away from, I think.
I think so. And I think from a personal perspective, that's very true. I don't, I don't know, or I'm not sure. I don't necessarily want to try. I think also what I see is there's also a sense of, or sometimes a compliance to the norm. And I guess what I mean by that is somebody who's super queer and has moved countries, lots of differences that I can point to that make me different. I think there is a reluctance on my part because I've experienced trying to fit in and it doesn't really work. What I see or notice is that people also sometimes want to think, I've created this life and it's like everybody else, or this is what it's supposed to look like. I have the house, the family, the friends, holidays, everything is in place. And so what change represents is a disruption to that. And that can sometimes cause anxiety and fear as well. Wait a second, I worked so hard to get what I'm supposed to have to be successful or whatever the case may be. I'm generalizing, but I think this is also plays a part.
Absolutely, absolutely. What will the dog do if I make the disruption happen? And I think the idea of disruption is greater than the actual reality sometimes, I think. Of course, there is upheaval when you're shifting things, and the thought is greater than, I do think, than the reality. So you think, it wasn't so bad.
Yeah.
Maybe. In preparation for this, we talked about wholeness. What does returning to wholeness as a definition to healing mean?
I'm going to say in my words what I think. And the way that I picture it is if you picture a circle as a whole circle, and there are things that happen in our lives that cause some kind of disruption. In other words, like a chunk is taken out of the circle, so it's disruptive and less whole. That's the kind of visual image. And there's lots of different reasons why that might happen. When we're younger and we're told you shouldn't act that way, or it's inappropriate for whatever reason to be like that. And so it's almost a disruption to this is how I am. This is how I show up in the world. But we somehow get the message that's the case. So there's an interruption. And let's say from a work context, we've studied, we've shown up, and somebody comes along. Maybe it's a leader, maybe it's a colleague saying, you're really bad at that. Not overtly, but in some language that we understand is, wow, I'm not good at this particular task or capability or whatever. And so it's a disruption to what we understand about ourselves. I think that's what I mean by the disruption, or there's some sort of chunk taken out of the wholeness. Healing then in that sense isn't just physical, or it's mental, spiritual, however you want to describe it. But it's the return to wholeness in that particular form. And I've experienced that, for example, in my work, where I had some disruption because of the way I tend to show up or how I lead, let's say. And I've had some negativity in terms of that's not correct. It's like you don't conform to the standard, let's say. And so I think my healing in a work context was to understand, actually, I'm very good at what I do. And actually, I lead not like other people necessarily, but effectively. And so I think that's the way I think about it. And it could be big, like a big breakthrough, but also it could be something small. And I think the last thing that I'd say about this is that we experience this when we are in flow. I think most people have heard about this before. When you're in work or life, everything just seems easy and you're working, and that's working from a place of wholeness where things are feel disrupted or like difficult or something like that. There's usually something there from my perspective that kind of gets in the way. And why I like working with coaches and organizations in that space, because it's something very acute, it's something that's happened, that's disrupted what's going on, either as a leader or the organization. And you can work to return to wholeness. And I've seen this happen as well, where you actually see the circle close, so to speak, and an organization goes back to flow, or a leader goes back to this idea of flow. I use that word intentionally only because I think most people have heard about this before and experienced it.
I haven't actually, so I'm
Okay.
curious about the flow. So give
Mm,
us an example, a tangible example where you've
yeah.
done that.
The thing that immediately comes to my mind is, and it relates to what we were talking about earlier, like where are you with your work, let's say, or what's happened in the past few years. And I think what I was noticing growing up, let's say in my work life, that there was an intention, but also I would say some barriers to showing up as my authentic self. In my personal life, I was exploring all of me, not just my mind, because that's usually what we bring to work, but also my body or my somatic experience or also spirit. And I'm not talking about religion or anything like that, more about values and who I want to be and my purpose in life, that sort of thing. And so I think fast forward to the last 2 or 3 years where I was exploring, how do you bring that into the coaching space? Because when we talk about return to wholeness, we can't discount what shows up in our bodies or like in our spirit, that sort of thing. And yeah, so when we talk about flow, I made the choice to pilot this way of being as a coach, holistic coaching. And how it feels when I coach in that way, in a holistic way, is it feels easy. It feels correct. It feels like I feel it in my body. Like I get excited, but in that way that you're like, I know that I did well, that I showed up as my complete self. And I think sometimes at work, we don't feel that. We feel like it's difficult or relationships are hard or that I'm like, I second guess myself, that sort of thing. So being in flow is when I feel in that space where I'm like, whew, gosh, I feel like that really worked. And I felt like just my complete self and it felt easy. And where it leaves me usually is I know I need to do this work because it feels right. And even in my previous work, there have been moments where I was like, this feels correct. This feels right. And I think that's what I'm talking about when we come to it from a place of wholeness, usually like a place of, I feel like this is where I'm meant to be. And I feel all the parts are complete. Then we feel in flow.
I understand that. And I guess I'm also curious in terms of how do you get a leader who's living in his head or her head, or their head to embrace this approach?
That's a really interesting one too. And I've been able to observe it over time in training that I've had or just working with clients and that sort of thing, because it is the overwhelming, I guess, what is the word? It's like the standard. It's what matters is what we think. And there's this premise sometimes you can think your way into innovation or creativity or something like that, but that's not always true. So I think, and so there's just different ways. Sometimes it's creating moments where we're just in the present. It helps actually to work with somebody from a coaching perspective because they're there across from you and it's really hard to get caught in your own thinking. From a personal perspective, I use different somatic techniques. And what I mean by that is just connecting between the mind and body. Mm-hmm. And for example, I was doing that in the gym this morning. I was like, how can I simply get into my body so I'm very present in that moment? And so I'm not worrying about what's going to happen maybe here or like next week or whatever, but I'm also not reaching to the past and thinking and like rehashing things. Mm. And so it's through my own personal practice that I'm able to work with others essentially to help ground them in their bodies or having dialogue, that sort of thing. And simply by inquiring what's going on in your body right now, how are you feeling? What are you sensing? Do you feel here or do you feel someplace else?
Yeah, those are very powerful questions to ask because it's often we're not in the present.
Mm,
We're often, as you're saying, or we could be thinking
mm,
about the past or what's my checklist for the future as
mhm,
about what's in front of me, basically. I want to talk a little bit about your upcoming workshop on transition and the use of photography
mhm.
as a tool of self-discovery and vision creation. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it was born out of this idea because I mentioned that I've gotten into photography, and it was really through personal experience because I was going through this period of in my life where I was like more open to saying yes to things. And this photographer is, can I take your picture? And I'm like, why would you want to do that? And he was like, and it felt very comfortable. And I was like, yeah, why not give it a try, kind of thing. And I really enjoyed the experience. And so we've actually worked together like now 5 times. And by it just happened that other photographers got in touch through Instagram or whatever like that. So I've had a lot of experience being photographed. And what I noticed through that experience is that there is a level of self-witnessing that is super uncomfortable because you look at yourself and you have to decide in the moment, do I like that photograph or not? And I started to ask the question, why is that? Why do I like this one and not that one? And I became much more comfortable with this idea of self-witnessing. And there's more that I could say about that, but that's the background. And I always had this idea of bringing it into a workshop space because I was like, I've had these profound experiences. I actually will tell this story because this is a really good one. Because at my social club, when I was living in London, they had this event with Rankin, who's this amazing world-renowned photographer. And he was like, you could sign up and have him take to your portrait. So I attended his talk and then we did the portrait session later in the day. He was clicking away and we had this back and forth a little bit. And the short of it is the last photo he took was displayed on the big screen that was just next to us. And there's people around and 5 assistants and stuff like that. So it's quite intense. But I looked up at that photo and I was like, I got emotional because I was like, I witnessed my strength in a way I've never seen before. And I don't mean physical strength. I just mean the emotion came through. And I was like, wow, I just got chills thinking about that because it was that profound for me. Because I know myself to be a strong person, but I've never really seen it before. And I was like, this is the power of art or the power of photography. So as I started to get into this is even before I even considered taking photographs myself. But as I started to do that, I keep that in mind because my intention when I'm doing portrait work is to somehow create space for people to emote or express themselves. And I thought, wouldn't that be amazing to have a workshop where people have that experience and they get a chance to self-witness, but also you have in a group context, other people to comment and say, what do you notice? And it helps the process a bit. Now I have a really good friend, Janji Verzabo, who we collaborate from a thought perspective a lot of times. But anyway, we're talking about this. And she's very into life transitions, particularly mid-year career, that sort of thing, and is super skilled at that. And so we're talking about, I don't even remember what, but this idea emerged. How can we combine the two? So it's like looking at transitions in whatever form they take in your life. It could be career, it could be personal, it could be with self, but then in creating space for people to really think about that. We talked about the liminal space already. If you're in that space, why not be intentional and sit with it within a group, get a bit of coaching, but then what comes out of that, hopefully, is somewhat of a vision of the future. It could be a word, it could be a phrase, but basically that's where I specialize. So I'm working with a person and they're bringing that word or emotion or whatever the case may be. And we do some photographic work together as a way to capture that particular moment and also allow them to practice what does it feel like to hold that word or emotion or intention in their body. And then the photograph is a way to witness that potentially, but absolutely what it creates is a memory. So you take that away with you and it's something to reflect on and to support you as you go through your transition, whatever the case may be.
What I love about what you're saying is, and it really resonates for me, is around self-witnessing.
Yeah.
Like you're saying, you a photograph of yourself and you thought, it's almost as if you're seeing yourself for the first time through your own eyes, and it's feedback for you, your own observation. You think, oh, I think that is a really powerful workshop to do. Of all the layers, I can see the different layers within that workshop, and then you walk away with carrying that, both the layers as well as this amazing photograph that's resonated with you to help you along your journey. It sounds beautiful, actually, to me.
Yeah.
And where are you offering this? Is it all over, or so people can access it?
Yeah, it's going to be in this amazingly light and open photography studio in Shoreditch in London. And even though I'm based in Southwest Wales, in Gyöngyös in Budapest in Hungary, we decided that would be the best place to meet there, but also in Shoreditch, because it's quite a creative environment. And I didn't live too far from there, and I used to spend a lot of time in the art galleries and such around. But we found this space to do it where we can have group work, individual coaching, but then a separate space for the photography, and hopefully be inspired by what we're around. I just want to say, I love the way that you describe that. It's almost like seeing yourself for the first time. The articulation of that really touched me. I felt that in a way, because I was like, that's so true.
Amazing. And when is this workshop, so that if people wanted to go to it, is there a date for it?
Yes, it is the 22nd of June.
Oh,
Sunday,
so there's enough time.
Yes, yeah. In fact, registrations aren't even open yet. The 10th of May, but all the information, all the stuff is available online, and we're starting to chat with people about it and such. And we do have early registrations that actually is a discount as well. So anyone can certainly get in touch, and we'd love to have people. Oh, it's only limited to eight people as well.
If somebody is looking to reconnect with their healing processes, what kind of insights and tips would you give to those individuals?
I think the first one that comes to mind is that it doesn't have to be everything altogether all at once, because it can feel really overwhelming. Like, I don't need to shoot for a sense of perfection. And I'm speaking about this because I'm going through some stuff myself right now. And I'll use that as the personal example. And I'm like, the reason why I'm dealing with it now in my 50s and not when I was in my 20s is because I wasn't ready yet. So I had to go through some other stuff first. So I think about it as in not even layers. It's more what's possible right now. And I don't have to do everything all at once. So I can think about what it is. And it could be even in the moment, like when one little thing I'm working with in this moment, or in my relationship, or in my work, or whatever the case may be. But the question I always ask myself is, do I feel ready? Am I able? And do I have people around me that I can lean on if I need to? And do I have my space to practice? And I use nature, I use working out, different things like that. So I have everything in place to support myself, then I'll do it.
I think that is a very wise thing. All the things you're saying, it is very wise, because it's about having a whole network of things that can help you along those journey. And what it also makes me think about, as you were saying, you maybe weren't ready in your 20s and you're ready now in your 50s. There's a phrase that another previous podcaster said to me, wherever you are is where you're meant to be.
Yes.
Jae, thank you so much for your time and your sharing your wisdom, your insight, and your beautiful workshop that's coming up. And I wish you the best with it. And thank you for connecting with me.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed it.
If you're interested in working with me, connect with me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, or www.nitasharma.com. And if you enjoyed the podcast, why not consider subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you have access to your podcast, and leave a review.